Good morning, or depending when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice of radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCG Radio. Now, this week on PTCG Radio, we are going to be looking through a couple bits of news, which are not terribly exciting, but I think you need to know about, and I do pride myself on keeping you lovely people fully informed about all the comings and goings of the Pokémon trading card game. We are then going to be looking at the results from the state championships, which happened this past weekend. The website, the Charizard Lounge, has added up the results again. So, as I tend to do, I'm going to be going through my analysis of these results, telling you what you need to know, telling you the trends you can be relying on from these states, and the ones you should be probably ignoring because they are, shall we say, a little bit less reliable. And then we're going to be finishing with something we haven't done for a while. We're actually going to do some listener emails. I've been saving them up for a little while now. I've had a bunch of really interesting emails sent in from lovely people. I'm not going to go through every email I've received. It would take a little while, but we're going to go through some of my favourite ones I've had recently. As always, if you want to get in touch with me, you can tweet me at the Wassy, or if you want to send me an email, the address is ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk. And sometimes it takes me a little while, but you will always get a reply from there. And although I don't do it as often as I would like on the podcast, every so often I am going to be sharing some viewer emails, some listener emails. So there we go. And a quick update on the YouTube channel before we get going. I'm doing everything in a new way, and there are all kinds of technical problems and blah, blah, blah. And then there was a dental emergency, which caused me to have a rather pronounced lisp, which is not fully sorted, but we've got temporary measures in place for now. So I have uploaded rounds 4 and 5 from Nottingham Regionals, showing interesting matches between Yveltal Seismitoad and Groudon, and I believe there was an Execute and an Yveltal Seismitoad as well. Round 6 is featuring an Yveltal Seismitoad mirror matchup, and Game 1 of that has recorded. There was an audio problem. For some reason I won't understand. At 33 minutes in, the sound magically went from nice clear commentary to static. So I've managed to salvage about half of the video. The first 20 minutes. So the first 20 minutes will be going online tonight, and the last kind of 25 minutes, half hour, will be going online hopefully very, very soon. And the next couple of evenings I should have time to record a couple more rounds. So over the next few days you can expect to see more of these lovely videos on my YouTube channel. They are coming. Go to YouTube and just search PTCG Radio, or just Google PTCG Radio YouTube. The first 2 rounds, rounds 4 and 5 from the event, are already up there, and round 6, at least the first half, will be going up tonight, and then the rest of round 6 and round 7 at least will be going up over the next couple of days. And then we've got a top 8, top 4, and the final match to go. They will all be going up. Do not despair, ladies and gentlemen. So, getting into it this week, let's have a look at PokeBeach.com. And the news is, there's nothing huge, but there's a few things. So, Rayquaza EX is getting a nice little box coming in June. It's coming on June the 3rd. It's going to be $20 in the US. These kind of things generally tend to be about 13 quid in the UK. It will come with a Holo Rayquaza EX promo. This was the one which came out from the Japanese magazine. It's not the really good Rayquaza colorless that you want to run, which is going to be coming out in the set. We don't know this for a fact, but PokeBeach reckons this is the one, and they're usually pretty good at stuff like this. You're going to get a jumbo version of the same card and 4 booster packs, so a nice place to get Rayquaza EXs, and let's face it, you're going to be mostly attacking with the Mega anyway. If I remember correctly, it's not the best Rayquaza EX, but it's something. We have some information about the new Japanese set as well. Bandit Ring, this is the 7th XY set coming, and there's going to be a Legendary Holo Collection mini set. Now, there's a Hooper, that's one of the new legendaries which hasn't really been out in the game yet. Hooper is coming out, every one of these new legendaries, Genesect and all of that, they all have their own movie, and Hooper's coming the same thing. And there's going to be a Bandit Ring set based around Hooper coming out in Japan on June the 20th, with 97 card plus secret rares. And it looks like, looking at, the movie and the pack image and all of that, it looks like we're getting Primal Kyogre, Primal Groudon, and Mega Rayquaza, just in case we needed a 3rd Mega Rayquaza card. But they're also releasing a Shiny Collection. It's not Shiny Collection, a Legendary Holo Concept Pack. Think of it like Shiny Collection or Dragon Vault. or even the Team Aqua Magma mini set. It's going to be released on July the 17th, 27 cards excluding secret rares, and will include legendary Pokemon from the film. And we can assume that includes Latios, Latias, Dialga, Regigigas, which makes me happy, Arceus, Reshiram, Black Kyurem, Hooper, and Pikachu being in the set. Now, here's what's interesting, and all the legendary Pokemon there will be holo. Here's what's interesting for me, though. We haven't had any Arceus cards. For those who have been playing a little while, back in the Diamond and Pearl, I believe the last Diamond and Pearl set, right before we went Heart Gold Soul Silver on, before Heart Gold Soul Silver was released, was Arceus. And this was the very first set I got in touch with when I got back into the game. I went to a pre-release for it, and there was loads and loads of Arceus cards, and Arceus was kind of every type, and you could play a deck with all Arceus cards. You could have as many Arceus as you like in this deck. Yay! We haven't had an Arceus card since. A lot of people have, this game has gotten a lot more popular in the last couple of years. A lot of people haven't played, have only started playing since then, and I've never seen an Arceus card, so I do hope it's good, and I hope the Regigigas is good. We shall wait and see. However, if we look at Dragon Volt, and we look at Shiny Collection, and we look at the Team Aqua and Magma, these little mini sets, they haven't been very good to us, shall we say. They've not produced many amazing cards. As for how we're going to get this, well, the Team Aqua, Team Magma has been its own mini set that you buy in little booster packs, little blisters of boosters. Same with Dragon Volt, but Shiny Collection was put as Radiant Collection in Legendary Treasures, which was largely a reprint set. We will have to wait and see how we get that. The pre-release promo for Roaring Skies is going to be the Funky Altaria, which has got the Omega Revolution Primal trait, and the ability which gets rid of weakness on colourless Pokemon. So any of you people planning a Rayquaza EX deck with Altaria and all of that will be happy to know that you're going to be able to get this card, nice and easily. So, that is, it's kind of cool. They seem to be making an effort lately to, give us semi-playable cards as the pre-release promo. So that's kind of cool. And it looks beautiful. It's got alternate art. It's got the Roaring Skies set logo on it. It's pretty darn cool. And the last piece of news... there are a couple of others. One of the last pieces of news is that Double Crisis is coming out very, very soon. We've seen all the scans. If you want to know about Double Crisis, go back a couple of podcasts. I did an entire podcast going through the Double Crisis mini set. So you don't really need to know much about it. There are no hugely playable cards. It's an interesting set, but it's kind of cool support for not very good attackers. But I did a podcast on this exact set, every card, very recently. Go back and look through it, and you'll find it nice and quickly. A couple people have asked recently, if you're ever looking for old versions of the podcast, YouTube does not have them all. Because I've only started, putting them on YouTube religiously, very, very recent. Well, not very recently, but over the last kind of few months. If you want a complete archive of PTCG Radio, go to ptcgradio.wordpress.com, and you'll find a complete archive all the way back to episode 1, the very first one I did, almost 3 years ago now, which is a little bit worrying that this has been a habit for so long. One thing I will say about the set, if you're a fan of the Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire games, the art is both beautiful and more indicative of the games than you usually get. You've got the Team Aqua and Team Magma on the sets, and they look far more like scenes from the game than they do just kind of static Pokemon images, which some of you may not like. I think it's brilliant, and although I've stopped collecting the sets like I used to, I think there's a pretty good chance I'm actually going to be buying a bunch of this set just because it's kind of cool to collect. And don't forget that when you buy it, you get a couple of so you get 4 booster packs, 7 cards per pack, and you get a coin and a pin, and they're only $13 for all of that, so I'm probably going to buy a few of these just for goodness. Moving on, with every set we generally get other blister packs, including ones which give you 1 pack and a promo card, and we can see the promo cards. There is a Heliolisk with the ability Dry Skin. Any damage done by an attack from a water Pokemon is reduced by 30. We've had a Hariyama with a similar kind of thing, and the Dragon Rayquaza has a similar kind of thing as an ancient trait. Way too specific to be useful. It is kind of cool against Seismitoad, who we're going to get to a little bit later. Seismitoad is huge, and this does mean that it's, Seismitoad's Quaking Punch will do a base damage of 0, but it's got 1 attack for free energy, a lightning double colourless, which does 60 damage and it's only got 90 HP. It does discard an energy on a coin flip, so as a really weird Seismitoad counter, maybe it would work, but I doubt it. And there's a Meowstic, 90 HP, Stage 1 Psychic Pokemon. It's got 1 attack for a Psychic double colourless, 60 damage, flip a coin, if heads, discard an energy attached to the defending Pokemon. Gee whiz, that sounds an awful lot like its Heliolisk's attack. Little bit weird. The ability Mysterious Ears, if this Pokemon is damaged by an opponent's attack, even if the Pokemon is knocked out, the attacking Pokemon is now confused. Not great Pokemon, but moderately interesting. And last but not least, June the 17th, we're going to get the Hone Palatins, featuring essentially Skeptile EX, Blaziken EX, and Swampert EX. Now, one thing which is interesting, I mentioned Blaziken and Swampert, I believe it was last week's podcast I mentioned it, or the week before maybe. And I mentioned that they weren't particularly good. We haven't seen Skeptile EX yet, so fingers crossed it's going to be awesome. It should... bear in mind, Blaziken wasn't very good, Swampert wasn't very good. I wouldn't cross your fingers for Skeptile. But anyone that was waiting for a Skeptile EX, we have got confirmation it is coming. We just have no idea what it does. And there was a lot more news than we thought. So, let's go into state championship results and then we'll finish off with some email. It's already 8:30 as I record this. I've already done a full day of work and parents' evening, and yet I just couldn't bear to not give you lovely people a podcast. Now, I'm going to give props to the Charizard Lounge. What they have done is they have taken the results off of the Facebook group Verbank City, and they've literally just popped it into a table. I was going to do this myself, but if someone else is doing it, why not? I am assuming that their information is correct, but they seem to be pretty good at what they do. And I encourage you all to check out their website. I cannot speak for the quality of the articles. I haven't read enough of them to really give you a good indication, but I can say that if you want to see a table of results, they're pretty good. But don't bother going and looking at the table. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know. I'm going to give you my analysis as I do. Hopefully it's going to give a little bit more than just looking at a table. So, one thing we can see is we have a clear best deck in format, and we have a clear second place deck, and everything else has dropped by the wayside. And this, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you probably could have seen this coming. This is the way the metagame's been moving. The best deck, absolutely, no question, is Seismitoad EX. Now, we've had 11 of the 13 results popped into this table. Seismitoad 1-4, came second at 6, got 4 top 4s and 11 top 8s for a total of 25 top 8s. That is, or 25 top 8s or better. That is pretty gosh darn good. We like this. Not only that, but we can see that there is also Seismitoad Manectric, which has been separately listed. Not sure why, because generally this is still a Seismitoad deck just with a Manectric tech. And that got an extra 3 top 4s and 2 top 8s, so we can actually add it up to 30. And that makes it far and away the best deck in the format at the moment. Whether that's because of the metagames at these states, whether it's because the best players are playing it, whether we're going to see any changes in later weeks of states, I don't know. Now, there's a question that's going to come up in the email section in a little bit. But if you get a really good Seismitoad Slurpluff list, and that's what a lot of these Seismitoad decks are turning into, very, very little actually beats it. I told you with the tournament I went to a couple of weeks ago, the question, the thing I posed was that even if I'd been playing Frizzy and Genesect, in 4 games I would not have got a single Emerald Slash off, because they were hitting Crushing Hammers and Headringers. So it's something to bear in mind. It is the best deck in the format. What beats it? We're going to be talking about that a little bit later. Frizzy and Genesect beats it, but then again, if they hit their heads on Crushing Hammer and they hit their Headringers, you're actually not beating it. We are potentially getting to a mono deck format, which is worrying, but as soon as Roaring Skies comes out, we've got Rayquaza, and that's going to even things up a little bit. Manectric also potentially could be pretty good, but you need that second energy on it to really be doing some damage, and Crushing Hammer is really going to hurt that. If you can ever get 2 energy on a Manectric, you can make sure that you are constantly hitting for 110 while you attach energy, and the Crushing Hammers become useless. But it's getting that second energy on the Manectric which is going to be a problem. Moving into the clear second best deck in the format, Evil Tally X, with 2 wins, 2 seconds, 2 top 4s and 11 top 8s for a total of 17. Clearly, this is what we're talking about. This is a good deck. It's been winning decks, and a lot of these have Seismitoad in as well. And I'm not going to go too much into detail on them because you can see these on those YouTube videos I talked about. You'll see a really good players like Matthew King and Ryan Morehouse playing these, and they are very, very good players. And it really needs to be pointed out that Evil Tally X is good, and it can beat a pure Seismitoad. But the problem is, you can't beat a Seismitoad with an Evil Tau because they're playing hammers. And this is what's making Seismitoad so good. The fact that you can use Slurpluff to draw through your deck, Lissandra's trump card to put it all back in, and you've got hammers. That is what's making Seismitoad so good. People have been trying to make it with hammers. If you look back on my YouTube, I tried to make it with hammers. But before Slurpluff was really seeing a huge amount of play, you couldn't get to your hammers quickly enough. Here, you do loads of drawing with Slurpluff, you put your cards back in your deck using Lissandra's trump card, so you're constantly drawing your hammers. So, you can be flipping Crushing Hammers pretty much every turn. And you can use Lissandra's trump card to put it all back in your deck. And then draw 4 or 5 cards just using Slurpluff. So, without having to play a Juniper or something like that, it really is a strong, strong deck. Evil Tally X decks are going to be relying on Seismitoad, and that gives them a disadvantage because they're not a straight Seismitoad deck. They might not be playing the Headringers, etc. Now, in terms of the Seismitoad mirror matchup, which I'm also going to mention a bit later, there are more nuances than this. But essentially, if you can get a Headringer on their Seismitoad and a Muscle Band on yours, you're probably going to win. You're going to stop them quaking punching for at least a turn more if you can hammer off their energy, and you're going to be able to hit for 50 while they can only ever hit for 30. And they're never going to get a Muscle Band down because they're always going to be trainer locked. So if you're playing a Seismitoad and you're worried about the mirror, there are cards you can play like Xerasic and Team Flagrant to try and get rid of their double colourless, because most of these card decks now are only playing 4 double colourless as their entire energy. And you can play things like Cassius to try and, recycle your Pokemon and all of that to give some healing, or Pokemon Center Lady to heal a little bit, etc. But honestly, from what I've seen, and I've played a lot of Seismitoad Mirror, if you can hit the Headringer Muscle Band combo, you're going to win. And if your opponent does, they're going to win. Moving on then, they are the top decks. And from the information we've seen, there is nothing to challenge this. Moving on to other cards, other decks that won stakes, there was 1 win each for Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre. Each of them had a win and a top 4, but Groudon had 2 top 8s, whereas Kyogre just had the win in the top 4. And I'm unsure what to think about these decks right now, because we've got 1 win out of 11 stakes for each of them. Maybe it was a particularly good player who picked up the deck. Maybe they've got a particularly good list. Maybe they hit particularly good matchups. Maybe they had a favourable metagame. I don't know, is the honest answer. If we see Seismitoad EX winning 4 out of 11, we can sit there and say this is a good deck. But any deck which wins 1 tournament out of 11 over various metagames could have been a metagame call, or a particularly good player, or good luck, or good matchups, or whatever. If I play Donphan in a tournament and all I play is things like Virizion, Genesect and Manectric decks, I'm going to walk that tournament. If I come across a bunch of Seismitoad, I'm going to do terribly. And it doesn't really matter, from one deck to the next. So it's something that needs to be borne in mind. The other thing to remember is these 2 decks are new. Seismitoad EX has just basically risen up to best deck in the format. It's been around for a while, it's been winning for a while, but it hasn't been the clear-cut best deck in the format, whereas now I think we can say that it probably is. Which is weird, 'cause it's only been a couple of weeks since I've said that Landorus Bats is probably the best deck in the format. That, as a side note, it's fallen off. Fighting Crobat saw 3 top 4s and 1 top 8 for a total of 4. It saw almost nothing. And the reason is, it's got a terrible Seismitoad matchup, and it's got a pretty bad Yveltal matchup. So, yeah. Yveltal can either use Seismitoad, or it can just, run through you with quick Yveltals, and Seismitoad is going to hammer off all your energy while locking you from trainers and hitting Landorus for weakness. So unfortunately, those decks are dropping off pretty quickly. It's unfortunate, but it's true. So moving on then. Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre, maybe they're amazing decks. I don't think we've seen the best list of these. Like I said, it took Seismitoad a while for us to find the best list, so maybe we'll get really good lists of these and they'll be more relevant in the future. One thing I will say, if you're, setting up a land, if you can get a couple of Primal Groudon set up, there ain't no Seismitoad in the world that's going to beat you. The question is, can you get Primal Groudon set up? Landorus and Jirachi are both weak to water. Robo Substitute can't be popped down while you're under trainer lock, and I've said before that they are the three kind of best cards for setting up. Maybe you can set up a Primal Groudon behind a Horlicher. Maybe that would be a good deck that would beat Seismitoad. Something to test, at least. So moving on then, we see a win for Donphan. Is this the beginning of a resurgence of Donphan? Well, I've talked about this on the podcast lately. A very fast speed Donphan list, which basically relies on trainer draw and then trump card to put it all back in again and go. Donphan is a stage 1 that attacks for 1 energy and can boost its damage output using strong energy and fighting stadium and muscle band and all of that. And there is every possibility that you can be running, 80, 90 damage on turn 2 of the game consistently. I love Donphan. I think it's got a good Yveltal matchup. I'd like it against Primal Groudon. I like it against Primal Kyogre. I like it against Bronzong and Flareon. I like it against every deck, but I really don't like it against Seismitoad. And I'm considering 2 decks for the weekend. One being Seismitoad Excadrill. I like Excadrill, and I just think it's quite fun. And one being Speed Donphan. Problem is, if I go to the regionals in Yeovil this Saturday, anyone in the UK, come on down, say hi. If I go to the regionals in Yeovil on Saturday with a Donphan list, which is all trainer based, and come up against a lot of Seismitoad lists, I've got some Horlicher that can try and put up a fight, but it's not probably going to go all too well for us. There is that promo Genesect though. Just letting that sit. And that's the big problem with Donphan. It is making a comeback. We do have a new way of making Donphan, which is very, very speedy, using trump card and trainer draw to run through the deck and then just recycle the deck. But Donphan's got a horrible Seismitoad matchup. You can win it by running a lot of Horlicher. The problem is your opponent is going to be trainer locking you and getting rid of all of your energy and poisoning you every turn and using Super Scoop Up. So you're not one-hitting, you're going to be poisoned, and they're going to be getting rid of your energy every turn. So back before Seismitoad lists were able to run so many hammers and Super Scoop Up and recycle their deck so often, putting in 3 or 4 Horlicher was a way to almost guarantee to win against Seismitoad. Seismitoad just couldn't keep up. These new lists, however, running around with Slurpluff, really are very, very good at just relying on Super Scoop Up and hammers and recycling their deck so quickly that Horlicher doesn't really do much against Seismitoad anymore. It will half kill it, and then they'll just scoop it up. So Horlicher doesn't beat Seismitoad like it used to, because you never used to have so many hammers and Super Scoop Ups with trumping it all back in your deck. Now they do. Night March won a regional, but I think the party's over for Night March. I really do. It got 1 win and 1 top 8, and that was all. Because Night March has a horrible matchup against Seismitoad. I've said that these Seismitoad lists run around with trump card, and that really is the way they work. Draw as fast as you can using things like Slurpluff, play a load of trainers, and then just trump all your cards back in and keep going. The way to beat Night March is play a trump card and trainer lock them. The Seismitoad decks play trump card and then they trainer lock them, and there's no way for Night March to win that. It's just not going to happen. Nothing you can do about it. Night March did get a win, but I think it is... I think the time for Night March has passed. Again, if you hit good matchups all day, you'll win, but Night March really struggles against good Seismitoad players who are playing trump card, and right now, they're all playing trump card. They're not all great players, but they are all playing trump card. And the last deck that won a tournament is Bronzong. Now, I don't know what to think about Bronzong. The really good thing about Bronzong is everyone stopped playing Garbodor. Garbodor's basically dead. Some Yveltal decks are still playing it, but crucially, Seismitoad decks aren't playing it. And what that means is that a deck like Bronzong, using things like, Edge Slash and using things like Edge Slash and Dialga and Cobalion, they can come and hitting. Not only that, but here we have a deck that can maybe fight against Seismitoad. Edge Slash has immunity against all Pokemon with special energy, and like I've said, the Seismitoad lists generally tend to play all just 4 DCE. They also do play a huge amount of lasers though, and you won't be able to use switches, so they can get KOs with lasers. Not only that, but you can use regular Cobalion to do Iron Breaker and stop any EX attacking the following turn. And you've got Dialga as a general big attacker. Not only that, but you have got your Bronzong there, which will allow you to recycle your energy, making their Crushing Hammers mute. You're still going to essentially lose your DC every turn you put it down, but you will here be able to use Bronzong to get your energy going. I can see how Bronzong could be viable. It's a deck very few people are playing. There are only 1 or 2 people in the UK playing it. Most of them have stopped. But Bronzong, I think, could be a relevant deck in the very near future, because you can play Edge Slash and Cobalion, and they are both good Seismitoad counters. They don't get around lasers, and that's a bit of a pain, but other than that, it's pretty good. And without Seismitoad playing Garbodor, they are going to be susceptible to your Edge Slash, and that's something to watch. So Bronzong, a deck you should be considering. Dialga is not going to do very much against Seismitoad, but against any deck that isn't Seismitoad, 4 energy Muscle Band, you do 170. It can one-hit KO an Eviltal. Not only that, but if you've got 2 Bronzong down, use Bronzong twice, attach a DCE, and you are attacking that turn. You can get 4 energy on a Dialga that turn. Dialga's the big hitter. Edge Slash and Cobalion allow you to help against Seismitoad. And even if you forget all of them, let's not forget that the regular Cobalion, the Cobalion EX, has an attack for 1 Steel Energy, which removes a special energy attached to the defending Pokemon. It means you can get rid of their DCE every single turn. These metal decks are worth having a think about, ladies and gentlemen. A deck that isn't really worth having a think about is Fairies. Now, Fairies saw quite a bit of play in the UK over the last couple of weeks. People are playing Fairies. Looking at the list here, Fairies just didn't have a showing. That just were. And Polion got a top 8. Mewbox got a top 8. Hippowdon got a top 8. The podcast isn't broken. I'm just, letting that settle for a second. And yet, there was no top 8 for Fairy, so it's something we need to bear in mind. Speaking of Night March and decks whose time has passed, Flareon. Second place, 2 top 4s, 2 top 8s, and that was, I believe, played by a lot of people. Flareon, I said it at the time and I'm going to repeat it now. Flareon is the perfect kind of deck to beat people who aren't prepared. As soon as you're prepared for it, you're in trouble. And honestly, it's still not going to beat Seismitoad even if you play Leafeon, because Leafeon is going to be under trainer lock. Leafeon is going to be maxing out at 80 damage, because you can just put down 1 DCE to attack. That means they will not 2-hit KO you, because 2 hits will be 160 damage. So they're not 2-hit KO. They're not 2-hit KOing you, and you're playing Super Scoop Up. I'm going to let you guys do the maths on that one. Seismitoad's going to win, and by the time you build in lasers and Verbank and all of that, Leafeon doesn't last as long as it should. I've told this many times. I managed to make top 8 at the ECC last year, the biggest tournament in Europe, with a deck revolving around Flareon and Leafeon. I have played a lot of Seismitoad this format. I've top cut tournaments this year with Seismitoad, so I'm familiar with Leafeon and Seismitoad from both sides, and I'm telling you, these Seismitoad Slurpluff decks, if you don't get a muscle band down, you can't play lasers. Seismitoad beats Leafeon every time, because Leafeon is doing a maximum of 80 damage, and you've got Super Scoop Up and Hypnotoxic Laser, and they don't. It's as simple as that. And that's basically all the relevant decks. Fairies is dead. Virizion Genesect really didn't do very well. It had a top 4 and 2 top 8s, which is less good than Mega Manectric Water, with probably the Plasma Kyurem seems to be the most played one with Mega Manectric. So it's really not doing very well. If you want to go to states and all of that in the near future and you want to pull out a win, you've got to play Seismitoad or Yveltal. It's as simple as that. They are the relevant decks. I'm sorry, it's just the way it is. Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre I'm unsure of. Donphan's making a comeback but has a terrible match against Seismitoad. Night March and Flareon, I'm willing to put my hands up and say I think that the time has passed. They had a very narrow window during which they were quite good. Since then, I think their time has passed. The one deck I do want you to have a think about is Bronzong. Edgeslash, Cobalion, and Cobalion EX are all fairly good against Seismitoad. You can recycle your energy, making you a lot less susceptible to cards like Crushing Hammer, and you've got things like Dialga, which is a general good attacker. What I will say is if they've not been that good until now, why would they suddenly be good now? I think they can be good against Seismitoad, but you've still got to set up under Trainer Lock, and you've still got an opponent that's using all kinds of hypnotoxic lasers. And honestly, if you're under Trainer Lock and they're lasering you every turn, they're probably going to win just as it is. And that really is what I got from this table. There are other things, but there's nothing which I think is particularly relevant. The table this time, we don't always see this from results, as anyone who's been listening to the show for a little while is going to know. Honestly, this time we've got some really, really clear results. So, yeah, I think it's fairly clear. Seismitoad is the deck to beat. Speaking of which, let's go through some emails. First one from a lovely chap called Dan Lee, a guy coming from Oakville, Ontario, Canada, listens with his 12-year-old son and 10-year-old daughter who have been playing for a year and have introduced him to the game, which is the kind of thing children tend to do to adults. Now, he asked a question about Seismitoad Slurpluff and suggested ways to counter. He says it's a force to be reckoned with in his local metagame, and he reckons that Virgin is going to handle it quite well due to typing and consistency, but what about adjustments to any decks? He also says the new sound setup is working very well, so thank you to anyone who's got in touch about that. I appreciate it. I think we've got it working pretty well now. Now, this is a question we have mentioned this week on the podcast, and the answer is, Dan, nothing. I think the metal decks could work very well, and that's about it. Virgin is going to work unless they hit the head ringers and crushing hammers. The best, and this is going to sound like a massive cop-out answer for which I can only apologise, the best counter for Seismitoad is Seismitoad. If you get a muscle band down and trainer lock them, especially if you can head ringer and or get rid of their energy, if you're trainer locking them and they're not trainer locking you and you've got lasers and all of that, you are going to win the game. Well, weird thing is, Seismitoad Slurpluff can actually be susceptible to other Seismitoad decks. One of the reasons I'm thinking about Seismitoad Excadrill is if you're playing a different Seismitoad deck, you're probably playing more trainers. One of the weaknesses of Seismitoad Slurpluff is that they tend to play very few supporters. I think I meant to pause a second ago. And that means that they can be, and they're only playing 4 energy, which means they can be slow on the setup occasionally. As soon as they get set up, they're off. But I've seen decks playing, 5 supporters and a Jirachi that have done very well. But if they can't hit their Jirachi or supporter early, then what are they going to do? It really is as simple as that. And if you're playing more supporters and more energy, you can hit, say, a Steel Energy turn 1, and then maybe you can get going. Now, I'm not saying this is great. I'm saying it's an option. I'm saying it's something you should be considering. It's one of the reasons I'm thinking about Seismitoad Excadrill this weekend, because I want to play something a bit different, and I want to play something that can handle other Seismitoads. Even sticking one Cobalion EX in there, just a regular, EX Cobalion, I can get rid of all of their DCEs. And if I can get rid of their DCEs, then that means that I can go ahead and start taking prizes while they're, trainer locking them while they're not trainer locking me. And if I've got my lasers and they don't, I'm going to be in a very good position indeed. Not to mention, if I can get rid of all their energy on the board, I can start dragging up Slurpluffs, and they can either retreat the Slurpluff or they can attach to the Seismitoad. They can't do both. As for just an all-out tech to Seismitoad, there is a promo Genesect, which I think does 30 for a double colourless energy and discards an energy on a coin flip, which means if you can hit heads, that'll be really good against Seismitoad, but you're going to drop the DC and they're going to get rid of it the very next turn. So, Yeah, sorry about that. So, and I'm going to mess up the next email here. Thank you to Dan for that email, as always. Thank you to everyone who sent me an email, whether I'm going through it today or not. Now, an email from Ethan Desortles. I'm probably butchering that surname. I do apologise. Let's just call him Ethan. Now, there is a Regirock from a Roaring Skies blister pack, and I dismissed it on the podcast pretty much out of hand. And he is making an argument against that. He's pointing out that it's one of only 2 basic Pokemon that has Omega Barrier. This is the ancient trait which Primal Groudon has, which essentially stops effects of supporters and item cards which target this particular Pokemon. And he says, I feel like Regirock could be used as a sort of energy hoarder for a Mega Gardevoir deck. Piling all your energy onto Regirock means that your energy remains pretty safe. It can't be Crushing Hammered or Enhanced Hammered, which can be useful in a Huntail deck using double colourless energies, and more importantly, it can't be Lysandred. So with a one-off Regirock in a Mega Gardevoir deck, you don't have to worry about spreading around your energies or worry about losing your energies on the board. That is an absolutely brilliant point, which I had completely missed. It is incredibly inventive, and that is pretty gosh darn good. That's pretty cool. Because essentially what this means is you put all your energies that you're not attacking, you need 3 on Mega Gardevoir to attack. Other than the 3 on Mega Gardevoir, you pile them all onto Regirock as it's a basic Pokemon. They cannot Lysandra or capture him into the active, and they cannot Crushing Hammer to get rid of your energy, meaning your energy is going to be safe. Now, he does point out that Genesect's Red Signal can bring it up to kill it, and he points out that Crawdaunt could be used to get rid of energy, but nobody's playing Crawdaunt and Virgin is dying a death. I think that is a really, really good point, and it was a really fantastic email, which I very much enjoyed reading, and it was a good point. How relevant Mega Gardevoir is going to be, I don't know. It's still a very interesting email that I got. And a question email from Tully Dixon. They've made a Fearow deck, saying it's pretty fun to play, but I was wondering what the clause effects of attacks done to this Pokemon means exactly. And this is one of those things that a lot of people who have been playing for a while take for granted, but it can be a bit of a pain for people who haven't been playing particularly long. So I think it's a question which deserves being answered, and I'll go through it on the podcast, and if you know what this means, don't worry, I won't be terribly long. Now, there's only one Fearow. It's from Phantom Forces, and it's a stage 1, which it has an attack for a double colourless energy called Fly. It does 40 damage, and it reads Flip a Coin. If Tails, this attack does nothing. If Heads, prevent all effects of attacks, including damage, done to this Pokemon during your opponent's next turn. And what it means is, damage and special conditions and anything like that will be stopped to that Pokemon. But there's a couple little appendices which we need to add to this. So it means your opponent cannot put special conditions on Fearow. It means your opponent cannot discard energy from Fearow. So let's say, for instance, you've got a DCE and a Cobalion EX comes up and tries to discard the energy. The energy won't be discarded if you use Fly the previous turn, nor will the 30 damage happen. It means that a Chandeler's second attack would not only not do the 70 damage, but it would not burn and confuse. This is pretty gosh darn interesting. There are 2 things that need to be mentioned. Some effects are on the player, not the Pokemon. The most often used example of this is Seismitoad EX's Quaking Punch, which stops your opponent using trainer cards the next turn. That is an effect on your opponent, not on the active Pokemon. We see a similar kind of thing with Safeguard Pokemon, your Sigilyph and your Suicune, which block attacks from Pokemon EXs, or effects of attacks. So, if I were to come across a Fearow and they use Fly and they hit Heads, and then I use Quaking Punch next turn, it does no damage, that's been blocked, but my opponent would still be blocked from playing Trainers the following turn, because the effect of blocking Trainers happens against my opponent, not against my opponent's Pokemon. The other thing which must be borne in mind is in Pokemon, the trading card game, a Pokemon is counted as a different Pokemon if it goes to the bench. So if my opponent Lysandras up a different Pokemon and kills it, and then the same Fearow goes into the active position, that Fearow counts as a different Pokemon, so Fly would not have happened essentially, and it means that Fearow can then be hurt the following turn. So let's say, for instance, my opponent, plays an Escape Rope, so I have to put up a different Pokemon, and then Lysandra's the Fearow. It's the turn after I've used Fly. It's the same Fearow, but it counts as a different Pokemon in the game. So it basically stops everything of an attack happening, the only two exceptions being anything that affects the opponent, not the Pokemon, would still happen, and if the Pokemon goes to the bench, then it's all reset, because even if it comes back active, it's going to be a different defending Pokemon. And another email that I just want to share to you, and I hope the chap is happy with me sharing this, had a lovely email from a chap called Alex, who sent me a lovely email reading, "Hello, I'm 18 and live in Pennsylvania. Just wanted to let you know that I'm a big fan of the show, even though I don't play the Pokemon trading card game. I just like hearing someone talk in depth about something they enjoy. Who knows, I may play someday." How awesome is that email? I had such a smile on my face reading that email. I showed my girlfriend and she thought it was awesome as well. If I can be entertaining people that don't even play Pokemon, that makes me very happy indeed. I hope Alex doesn't mind me sharing that email with you. And I hope you do start playing someday, Alex, partly because it's an awesome game, but partly because, I mean, this season, I've made it very clear on the podcast, I'm not going for a World Invite. I'm not really worried about winning tournaments at the moment. I'm playing, I'm keeping up, I'm testing and all of that, but then I'm going to tournaments with Mewtwo, Bats, Wobbuffet, and this weekend it's a choice between Speed Donphan, knowing it loses to Seismitoad, or Seismitoad Excadrill, just to be a little bit different. I'm not going for a World Invite this year like I have been in previous years, and yet I still love going to tournaments because I go along and I meet my mates and I have fun, and occasionally I end up doing well. Okay, you know, like the one time I took out Seismitoad Excadrill, I ended up going completely unbeaten, but missing top 8 due to, losing the first 2 rounds due to lateness. So, even if you don't take the game seriously, you don't spend a huge amount on cards, and you don't go around to a bunch of tournaments, go to a few, meet some people, I reckon you will enjoy yourself. And I reckon that will be enough for today, ladies and gentlemen. I've told you all about the interesting news, I've gone through the stakes results and told you everything you need to know, and we have had a look at some listener emails, and keep sending them in to ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk. I don't get to them very often, but keep sending them in, and I'll collect a few of my favourite ones, and then hopefully in the near future I will be able to share a few more listener emails with you on podcast when we've got a little bit of time. Make sure you check out my YouTube channel. As I've said, there will be a video going up. By the time most of you end up listening to this, there will be another email coming, so please make sure you look out, a video coming, so please make sure that you look out for that, and all the other videos going up in the next few days. And as always, do make sure that you keep checking out the podcast on a weekly basis, tell your friends, etc. As always, thank you very much for listening. Have a lovely week. Look after yourselves until next week. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.